Let's go ahead and pivot here. Deion Sanders, Colorado, Deion Sanders. That's for the algorithm. Anytime you talk Colorado, you know YouTube's just like, oh, sweet, auto traffic. So episode just paid for itself. They get a huge win, though, on the recruiting trail this weekend for a 2025 quarterback out of Georgia. Ivins, we'll start with you. What have you seen in Hill, and what is his potential there in this Colorado offense?
So this is going to surprise people, but I think this is the most important high school acquisition for Coach Prime at Colorado to date. And that's because I think Antwann Hill has multi-year starter upside, and I think he can be a true impact player in the Big 12, right? Remember, Colorado's moving to the Big 12. And why is this all important? Well, Colorado, what is the quarterback outlook? I think Shedeur could come back in 2024. You know, it seems like that's a possibility. One more year with Dad. But what's the plan in 2025? I mean, what transfer quarterback is going to go there to sit behind Shedeur when Shedeur plays every single snap? Because at times it looks like they're trying to pad stats. So, you know, someone's going to have to be the guy in 2025. And I think Antwann Hill, from what we've seen of him as a freshman to a sophomore to this past summer at Under Armour's Future 50 camp, and then now 6-7 games into his junior season at Houston County, he's starting to figure it out. I think he's completing just under 70% of his passes. He has a 6'5", 215-pound frame. It is imposing to see him in person. And you would maybe assume he's like, hey, a run-first guy. He's not. He's kind of like Shedeur. Like, if the opportunity presents itself, he's going to get you 15 yards when he scrambles. So I think it's huge for Colorado. And no one's ever talking about, like, what's down the line. I mean, Coach Prime saying, hey, you know, this is the worst I'm ever going to be now. Well, I think Antwann Hill maybe could be the guy that helps elevate that squad at some point, down the line.
Yeah, I think a big, toolsy, physical kid. You saw the B-roll there, bud, that I know you filmed down while we're at Future 15. I think he was up and down there, you know, but in terms of the raw physical traits, Andrew and I were just talking about this. I mean, you see a guy that's got a lot of physical clay. There's a lot of developmental upside there, which just means he's not a finished product. And then you go back and you look at him, he's playing good ball in the state of Georgia. He completed 70% of his passes, had over 3,600 yards passing, had 40 touchdowns and 3 INTs. It's like the Cedric Bailey thing, right? You see these guys in person and they're like, whoa, that guy's got a ways to go. And then you look at what they've done statistically and it's impressive, right? So I guess what I'm saying is the game within the game, the intuition, the feel of it, taking care of the football, maximizing opportunities, those are all a big part of it. So I think Andrew brings up a great point. I think for Colorado, you're doing anything and everything. And then obviously Deion's going to have a huge influence of what happens with Shedeur. But that would be the best case scenario, right? Get Shedeur back. You're probably looking at the transfer portal again in 2025, have a Band-Aid. But in terms of long-term, like you got your guy there, right? And for Colorado, this is big boy recruiting because they took a swing at Bryce Underwood, the #1 quarterback in the class of 2025. They got the temperature check, and guess what? That's great PR. If you don't get that kid, you got him on campus, right? And everybody's talking about Colorado. You took a swing at him. Now you got your pivot, and your plan B is a guy like Antwann Hill, who's a top 75 player for us and the next #6 quarterback in the country. That's big boy stuff by Deion Sanders in Colorado. They're going to spend a lot of time in the portal, and they're kind of the inverse of what everybody else is. I feel like everybody is building through high school and then supplementing through the portal. I think Colorado is going to be the exact opposite. I think they're going to build holistically through the portal and then complement through high school. But what they're going to have to do there is build long-term at premium positions. They've done that 2025 and Antwann Hill. So, like, tip of the cap to them. Like, that's how you do it.
One note that I didn't get to put in earlier, we talked about proof of concept. I think having Jeremiah Smith in attendance in the shoe when the rest of Ohio State's offense is not working, and they're like, hey, we have a stud. We're going to throw him the ball 16 times, 11 catches, 180 yards or whatever. Like that probably doesn't hurt their chances of holding on to, #1 receiver in the country.
So I spent a bunch of time with Jeremiah Smith on Thursday. I was playing like producer. I was at Shaman Amadana, had to introduce some people, but I spent a lot of time with him, and I'm far from the scoop guy anymore. Like, that is not my job. But kind of my feeling after spending that time, like, I think he wants to go to Ohio State. Like, I think that's where he wants to be. And I think Brian Hartline is the reason He's an elite talent that just needs to be polished. And I think that's what Brian Hartline does. He gets these guys that are really, really good and he fine tunes them. And I think Jeremiah Smith notices that. And I did drive out of Chaminade Madonna thinking to myself, all right, Jeremiah just said he's going to be at at Ohio State on Saturday. I'm like, is he flying private? Because that game was at noon. He played till like 9 p.m. on Friday night. I was trying to figure that out. But, he could have went to Miami on Saturday and been at Hard Rock. He could have been to Florida State to see them take on Duke on homecoming in a rowdy environment. So I do think if you're Ohio State, like that is a win, even though, there's a lot of reasons why these kids visit schools. He wasn't anywhere else. He saw Marvin Harrison, move the ball.
I have a gut feeling on that one. That one's going to get testy while we're on the desk, for signing day. Like I'm just saying, right? We just talked about Florida State, Miami. All three of those guys have seemed to got the NIL stuff figured out, right? And this dude, Andrew, we have talked about as a generational talent, like the beautiful blend of ceilings and floors, and can step in day one and be one of the best players in the country at his position. All three of these guys have plenty of reason to go out there and try to sell the vision on keeping this guy in state. So as much as Ohio State makes sense on the field, we just talked about Missouri, right? And all else is equal. Hey, you got to look at the in-state schools. I think those three have a little bit of a built-in advantage there, where I think they're going to make it extremely difficult for him to end up in Columbus, in my opinion.
All right, two thoughts on that. Number one, I would not be surprised if Jeremiah Smith does not sign during the early signing period. I think he could just show up at the school of his choice as an early enrollee. And I think Brian Hartline and his future would be the reason why Jeremiah Smith waited. Number two, all right, you want to talk proof of concept. Miami, Florida, and Florida State aren't exactly churning out first-round wide receivers. I think Kadarius Toney is the last one from those three schools. He had one of the worst NFL performances ever, according to PFF, early on in the season. I know Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson could change a little bit of that. Ricky Pearsall maybe. But, receivers haven't really been coming out of the big three. And I think that continues to get hammered home to Jeremiah Smith and his camp.
I think this is going to be egregious amount of money at the finish line. And, we'll see what happens.
Well, he gave a quote to Brandon Marcello that I don't think has been published yet, which was, I was like, I cannot believe you just said that. So I'll just tease that for whenever that story goes out.
We look forward to reading that on 24/7 Sports.